What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about 5 things I wish I knew before I started Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's a fantastic game that I'm still not all the way through, but I wanted to kind of make a beginner's guide of sorts type thing here. And of course, I want to thank them for providing me a code for the game. And with all that stuff being said, let's jump into it. I'm going to kind of cheat with this number 1 thing. It's be ready for the opening of the game. This isn't going to make your life any easier. This isn't a gameplay tip or trick of any sort, but this is something that you may or may not have seen on social media. I mean, this game hits freaking hard and hits right away. The first hour of this game, I genuinely and truly believe is going to go down as one of the greatest all-time gaming openings. When you think about the ones that kind of have those gut punches right at the beginning, The Last of Us, of course, comes to mind, amongst others for sure, but this really, I think, joins a very elite company of getting you into that world, giving you the world view, the story, the lore, what's kind of happening, and getting you immediately invested into finding a solution to the situation that these people find themselves in. It is perfectly, and I don't use that word often on this channel, it is perfectly done and an incredible start to the game. Now, with that being said, let's jump into more kind of tips and tricks and like systems of how this game works. Number 2, grinding versus not grinding. Now, what I find interesting about this, because I've kind of tried to play this game both ways in the earlier sections, and it's tough because I do think they give you the resources to grind, right? Pretty much any time that you find a flag in the ground, you can rest, the enemies will respawn, and there is reason to grind, you know, going around just taking out the same enemies. I mean, you are getting knowledge of the attack, so you're constantly kind of getting better with your dodging, parrying, countering, all that jazz, and you're also just leveling up, so you're going to be getting skill points and maxing out your health, or, you know, investing it into new abilities that these characters can use. There's definitely a reason to level up, right? I mean, that's pretty much what it is. There's absolutely reasons why you would want to level up. But I think that this game, does actually, in an insanely clever way, is, well, I just mentioned it, if you get good at dodging and parrying, you really, I think, are set for a large amount, at least the early stages of this game. You know, your team's composition, which we'll talk a little bit about that later on in this video, there are ways of making it easier on yourself, okay? In terms of, you know, balancing your party and what moves each character does. But generally, if you know when to dodge, if you know when to parry, I don't want to say easy, because like those things aren't necessarily easy, but it makes the game easier. You know, you don't have to worry literally about being hit, and then even if your damage on the enemy isn't all that amazing, the enemy repeats their attack, so if you just know when to dodge or when to parry, you're literally always going to be good. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there where you say, you know, I'm sure there's people out there that either prefer grinding, don't prefer it. The game gives you reason, I believe, to grind, and there's purpose to it, and it's fun. I think the fighting in this game is awesome. But at the same time, in an interesting way, you don't technically need to. You know, I think that you will generally stay around the level that you need to stay around, and really that's the more important part, which let's just kind of piggyback off of that and go to number 3, the importance of parrying and countering. Now, I saw that fantastic, I think, Polygon article, of course, that said, don't worry about it and just do dodging. That person, I think, doesn't know what they're talking about, and I think anybody that's played this game will tell you, no, look, honestly, okay, the way I do it and the way that I've seen others kind of tell other people to do it as well, learn the attacks through dodging. Because, and I don't know if this is like versus what I found versus statistically true, okay, this is just kind of my own interpretation of it. There are windows to doing these things, and I do find the dodging window to be pretty open. I think that's a factual thing. I'm pretty sure, you know, actually hitting the button to parry and counter is a shorter window. You've really got to do it at the very last second, which can be difficult, but dodging is a lot easier. So, you know, again, I guess factually, if you dodge every attack, technically you don't really have anything to worry about, right? But there are some enemies that have kind of dodging built into their own thing, and what you kind of find early, I had noticed this, you know, a lot of floating enemies have a way of dodging all of your attacks. Physical attacks, right? Attacks that you're going up to them and slicing. So what you oftentimes have to do to them is either shoot them or counter them. And then those are some really easy points. And just generally in this game, there are some very big enemies and there are challenges here. And if you can parry and counter, you are going to deal far more damage, especially early on, than you can ever do with your own attacks. So there is a lot of reasoning there to do it. And again, I guess what I would advise is learn it through dodging. Learn it through just constantly be looking at their attack, seeing at the right time to dodge, and then maybe wait a quarter of a second after you would press the dodge button and parry. That's the big thing to me that I've learned with parrying, that the moment you think you have to do it, give it another second and then do it, because sometimes it just takes, that quarter, half second for that attack to get to you. Okay, and number 4 is not being afraid to try things out. Now, this might actually start to blend into the 5th and final thing, but what I'm talking about here specifically is the skills on these characters. So you build your party rather fast, kind of right away, and you're constantly getting new characters. And what I have found early is just kind of go nuts. And I say go nuts for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it gives you an opportunity to kind of mess around with stuff, right? If you're just like picking skills, or maybe close one of your eyes and pick it with the other eye, you're just picking skills, and you can mix and match. Like once you have those skills, you can mess around. And a lot of the skills that I'm at least noticing early on, will be differences between deal light damage to a person versus medium damage. And it's like, I think those are pretty easy to look at the skill and say, okay, this might take another AP point, but it does way more damage, so I'm going to pick one of them versus the other, right? Or, dealing, like I've picked before, if it's like earth damage to one person versus earth damage to the whole board, I picked the whole board just because what's it really hurting? Especially, again, like there's a lot of ways of getting AP. I don't really need to worry about building that up to get to that skill. So, and I think you just realize that as you start to play it more and more, is don't be afraid. And also, look, if you make a catastrophically bad decision, right? You pick the wrong skill. If you're looking around, even moderately, like I'm trying to look around, but I get lost often. There's no mini map. So, I sometimes go into circles and I backtrack when I don't mean to. But even if you do a little bit of exploration, you're going to get enough resources. You're going to, whether it's like money, their form of currency, or whether it's just like items. And I think I have 9 times I could reset my skill tree if I wanted to, and I haven't even done it yet. So it's like, if you really mess up, you have the potential to completely reset it. And again, like what's the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to realize what these characters are capable of, and you're going to be able to see which ability is better than another one when you actually go in. So that would be my 4th point, and my advisement is don't worry about what you're picking early on. There's many means to reset it, and it doesn't, I personally don't think it holds you back in any way. But speaking of that, and let's kind of go into the 5th one, which is just every other system. So these are things of just, again, trial and error. Things like, I have found when an enemy is shielded up so many times, oftentimes I turn off my brain, especially if you fight the same enemy over and over, and I would just go in for a base attack to knock the shield off. Well, no, actually what I have found is good is use the gun. Everybody has a pistol or, a projectile of some sort. If somebody has 4 shields up, now look, there are some attacks that'll deal multiple times. So if you pick a skill that's going to hit the enemy 3, 4, 5 times, well, okay, those will knock off 3, 4, 5 shields. But what I've found, especially early on in a battle, if enemies have shields, I'm just shooting them. I'll waste the AP points because I will build them back up, right? This is where you have to use more of your buffs that you bring into the game, where it'll give you some sort of like advantage in the beginning of a match, or it'll give you extra damage when you're below half health. You get these things very quickly. I have maybe like 25, 30, just a few hours into the game, and you build your characters out, right? You kind of give them a little something that makes them a little unique versus somebody else, gives them an advantage, in the battlefield. And you just kind of work, again, like trial and error. You just kind of work through it. Something as simple as the game saves a lot. So when you go into, and there's optional, side bosses in this game, I versed the trumpet one, and the trumpet one is actually rather early in the game. It's worth doing, and really a lot of the bosses in this game are worth doing, and all that I did, walk up to it, learn its attacks, got destroyed because it could like almost one hit you, learn the attacks, and then if you actually just go to the start menu when you're fighting, you can load up the previous save, which normally is right before a big fight. So a side boss, I walk up, I learn the attacks, I get destroyed, reload, even before I die. You don't even have to wait till you die. Reload, do it again, over and over and over until you learn the attack pattern, and you can parry, and you can counter, and you can dodge, and you'll never get hit, and then you win it very easily. And these are just some of the little tricks. Trying to build your characters to work with each other, right? Maybe it's having opposite elemental effects on weapons. Maybe it's having all of the same, right? Building up fire damage. That's something that I do quite often in my game, right? 2 of the 3 characters, at least at a point when I was playing, had fire weapons. So they would constantly be applying burn, which even if the enemy was resistant to, would deal damage in between turns, right? Or, the main character, like he can, I think naturally, there's marking abilities, and marking, as soon as you manage to mark an enemy, that next attack on the enemy is a lot of extra damage. So just kind of applying, okay, this character can do this character can do that. One character maybe is your healer. One character is more of like, the one that can apply burn or whatever. I'm not being specific, and I'm not being specific honestly on purpose, because it's learning what each thing does, right? There are a lot of mechanics in this game. I mean, honestly, what it comes down to is learning how to parry and counter, and then everything else, because there's no pressure, right? If you can never get hit, there's no pressure to figure out how to attack your enemy and how to work on getting all of your party members to work as a team and kind of help each other in some sort of stat. You don't have to worry about that stuff, and you can go at your own pace as long as you know how to block and parry. That's like the number one thing, again, I would really stress, because there's no pressure anymore after that. So that's what I would tell any new person joining the game. Let me know in the comments. Let each other know what you would say to each other. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.